It would be always
One word, there's always one
more.
more.
Why is there a cedar?
This is the canoe club, and it's really, hi there, refreshments in fact, for our seniors, yeah, 50 and above.
This is a replacement to the original canoe,
Which
and
thing?
they go in as a senior center for the senior.
Good would be a kayak.
Maybe.
This original, they used to have canoes here, and rent out way back in the
Many years ago.
Yeah, yeah. And it's still, you're allowed.
That's right, a lot of people, kids grew up.
No,
Make it some-
no engine.
It's probably the least
Oh, yeah.
known state park in New Jersey.
We're not really a state
Town.
park,
It's
it's
a
a
town
town
It's a town
park.
park.
The state owns the property across the street. owns
recording
the
this,
Smith
but it's
factory.
They have 50 acres over there.
Yeah.
Do you want to use the podium?
He doesn't want to. He'd rather not, I guess.
Right here.
Very animated.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay? All right. My husband wants me over here, so. The camera. I have the great honor to introduce Dr. Richard Colby. I met Dr. Colby, maybe 4 or 5 years ago at the Egg Harbor City Historical Society. He was there when Greg and I stopped in one day. And of course, like many museums, when you get a visitor in, whoever is there that day just loves having a visitor come in. He took us all around the museum, took us upstairs, gave us a wonderful tour, and I fell in love with the museum, and it really, one of the things that inspired me, I think, to get more involved in the museum here in town. So this, as I said, is a real honor. Dick started at Stockton University in 1971.
I was one of the Mayflower faculty.
Yep, one of the original faculty. He is now a professor emeritus. He did his undergraduate work at MIT and a PhD at University of California in Berkeley in biophysics. So we have a very learned man here. Dick is going to talk about a very, very interesting, wonderful subject in Egg Harbor City, and that is Dr. Smith's Health Sanitarium, which is right around the property where the Historical Society is. That's on Lincoln Avenue, isn't it?
It's on London Avenue.
London Avenue, I'm sorry, London Avenue. If you have not been there, it is an absolute must. Go to the museum. Across the street is a section called the Serpentine, and I'm sure Dick is going to talk all about it. But the health resort was started around 1902. As you know, Egg Harbor City was basically established by Germans, unlike our town, the Italians. The Germans, as you probably know, are very precise people. Everything has to be exactly so. So their town was set up in exact squares. The property is all exact squares. Unlike Hamilton, where the streets go every which way and you can't decide which way to go or whatever. So a German gentleman by the name of Dr. Smith set up a sanatorium, and it was considered to be a health resort around that time, starting in Europe actually and in Germany. The idea of using water as a health cure became very, very popular. It found its way here to the States. And you may have heard me do a discussion about Dr. Nivison, who was a woman physician here in town, who also was very, very interested in the water cure up in New York State and traveled all around New York State and then came to Hammond to have a sanatorium. Well, Dr. Smith built this sanatorium in Egg Harbor City, and people would come and bathe in the healing waters of the river that runs through it. Why were the waters so magnificent? Well, we know that we have cedar waters here in all of our lakes, and the cedar in the water was supposed to cure everything from, I think, a big toe ache to rheumatism to anything. So that is the topic for tonight. I think you're going to be amazed by this presentation, and I am proud to present Dr. Colby. Dick.
Might have been too much of an introduction. I was sweating this talk because I'm not a historian, as you've already learned, but I do love to live in Egg Harbor City, which, when I needed a place to live in the vicinity of Stockton College, seemed to me the most interesting place within 10 miles. And of course, Hamilton is not within 10 miles of Stockton, but otherwise I would have considered it. It has a interesting history, and it also was originally German-speaking, and I happen to also be German-speaking, so it was a good fit for me. One of my requirements was to live within 1 block of a bakery, and I was able to satisfy that in Egg Harbor City. I said I was sweating this talk because I don't really have the mindset of a historian, but in preparing for it, I had plenty of materials to look through in the Egg Harbor City Historical Museum, which was a part of the original health resort. And I put a few of the items that I looked at on the bench there that you can look at afterwards. But one of the things I discovered in our files was a talk on the Egg Harbor the health resort, prepared by a real historian who was a young Egg Harbor City resident by the name of Bob Peterson, who was the headmaster of the Pilgrim Academy, had a degree in history from the University of Delaware, and who gave a talk after the first year of the Egg Harbor City Historical Society, which was 1991, on this topic. So I'm going to read it. I'm sorry. It has everything you want to know. It has much more than I could ever have found out for myself. There was something else I wanted to say, but it escaped my mind. Oh yes, he didn't prepare this talk either. He got it from another source, but it was his own source in the sense that he wrote this as a paper for a history course that he took at the University of Delaware. But he gave it to the Egg Harbor City Historical Society. And it does mention Hamilton, and I hope I don't read it too fast or too slow. And it has some other stuff in it that you might, I hope, find interesting. Dr. Smith's Health Resort. In the fall of 1983, the sleepy little town of Egg Harbor City, New Jersey, population 4,000, was catapulted into national news when it was discovered that the town elects a harbor master, but has no harbor. The election was called South Jersey's most unusual election, in which 2 candidates vied for a post with no duties or salary. As one observer put it, every town should have the equivalent of Egg Harbor's harbor master, a job with no duties at all. This way, the voters could be sure that at least one official was doing the job he was elected for. Other than this brief attention due to an election oddity, Egg Harbor is not known for much today. Such was not the case in the early 1900s, when Egg Harbor was known nationally for fine wines, cut glass, its German-American culture, and last but not least, its popular health resort. On January 8th, 1900, a stocky, bearded gentleman claiming to be a doctor appeared before Egg Harbor's Common Council. Dr. Charles Smith, a visitor in this charming little German-American town in the Pine Barrens, was permitted to present his plan for a sanatorium in Egg Harbor. He told the mayor and the councilman that how he planned to make Egg Harbor famous as a health resort. Within 6 years, Smith's plan had become a reality, and for the next 15 years, Egg Harbor residents would be both amazed and entertained by the incredible Dr. Smith. The town of Egg Harbor was uniquely prepared for such an enterprise. Located just 18 miles northwest of Atlantic City, which was then in its heyday as a seaside resort, Egg Harbor was on the rail line connecting to Philadelphia and New York. Patients could easily be drawn from both of these metropolitan areas. Founded in 1858 by German immigrants seeking refuge from the persecution of the Know Nothing movement in this country, Egg Harbor still had a vibrant German culture that was enjoyed by those who passed through the city. I should point out that the Germans in Egg Harbor City did not come from Germany. They came from Baltimore, they came from Chicago, they came from New York, they came from Newark. They had already come to this country and didn't like what was happening in the communities that they came to. So most of them, it was advertised widely along the East Coast especially, but we were not a German society, we were a German-American society, we always were. In 1905, one could stay at the Bavarian Hotel, one of approximately 20 hotels, and people came to Egg Harbor City also to stay for a week or a weekend in the hotels and just hear the singing society and hear the other musical and other cultural groups that gathered there all the time. There were at least a half a dozen different bands and orchestras and choruses and so forth. The most famous of which was the Aurora, which was all male. Okay. They could have lunch of Wurst and sauerkraut at Mrs. Ruster's Rathskeller. They could read the news in the German language newspapers. They could take tours of the farms in nearby Germania on Bremen Avenue and so forth. There was a pottery and a bakery and so forth. At the 1905 Golden Jubilee celebration, the local congressman warned his listeners that Egg Harbor must remain German or fall. Here the cruel wilderness offered nothing which could attract people who hoped to get rich quick. The earth bore no jewels, no coal deposits were hidden in the bowels of the earth, which could provide material to turn the humming spindle of the buzzing wheel. However, German perseverance, German tenacity and determination conquered this. I've gotten off a little bit, and I'm going to end that paragraph, which is a quote from the congressman. Egg Harbor's German heritage and flavor gave it a unique atmosphere that would give Dr. Smith's patients the feeling that they were in a different world. Moreover, a health resort in Egg Harbor would doubtless be approved by German immigrants, for Germany had been famous for its spas since Roman times. After World War II, West Germany still boasted over 200 such spas. Egg Harbor's German culture was not the only thing that set it apart. Egg Harbor is located in the Pine Barrens, part of New Jersey. At this time, it was commonly thought that the antiseptic character of the atmosphere was useful in curing consumption and other diseases. Indeed, a certain Professor Loomis advocated the planting of evergreen trees around residents to further promote the antiseptic effects of the atmosphere. In addition to the pine forests, Egg Harbor had a temperate climate that was advertised as being never too hot in summer and never too cold in winter. Even though the great blizzard of 1888 was still fresh in people's minds, Egg Harbor's promoters compared the climate favorably with that of all places, California. But Egg Harbor's most distinguishing feature, as far as Smith was concerned, was its cedar water, or Cederwasser, as the local people called it. Flowing through South Jersey swamps, in which tall stands of cedar grew, these waters had a brownish tint. Along with water from Egg Harbor's wells, the cedar water gave Egg Harbor the reputation of having excellent drinking water. Indeed, when in 1871, Alexander Schem entered a few lines about Egg Harbor into his German-American encyclopedia, he mentioned as a special attraction the town's herrliches Trinkwasser, magnificent drinking water. When Smith arrived in Egg Harbor, cedar water was already being used to make the beer at the Christian Atz Brewery. Bathing in cedar water constituted Dr. Smith's main treatment. Cedar water was the Sanitorium's reason for existence. Smith's cedar water, issuing forth from his fountain of youth, as he styled it, would allegedly help many patients suffering from arthritis, rheumatism, and other maladies. Smith's health spa, based on the alleged healing powers of cedar water, was a new variation on an old theme. In ancient Greece, the temples of Asclepius were built near springs supposed to have curative powers. The Romans thought that so much of warm springs and mineral springs that the remains of hundreds of Roman spas have been found throughout lands once conquered by the Roman Empire. It is believed that Rome itself at one time contained more than 800 baths. And in other parts of the empire, particularly Germany, Roman legionnaires recovered from the ardors of battle. During the Middle Ages, only the wealthiest could afford the time and luxury of watering places. Charlemagne, for example, held court in the baths of one of the French bathing towns, which had also been a favorite with the Romans. Eventually, each spa became known for its special characteristics. In Vichy, France, one could partake of alkaline waters, which were supposedly good for those affected with gout, liver diseases, and diabetes. At Wiesbaden, in Germany, one could find the best thermal saline waters in Europe. The Wiesbaden waters, which supposedly tasted like warm, highly salted chicken broth, was reputed to be good for rheumatism, gout, and general recreational bathing. At a spa in Belgium, those suffering from anemia could have their blood restored by the special waters of that place. And at Carlsbad, one could gain relief from diseases that attack persons who led easy and luxurious lives. He's got footnotes for each one of these claims. In America, watering places were not heavily patronized until about 1760. Only as the countryside became more settled and stable could Americans begin to enjoy the advantages of health spas. Stafford Springs in Connecticut became one of the first spas in America to do a lively business. Stafford Springs developed a reputation for curing gout, sterility, pulmonary hysterics, and other maladies. Eventually, other springs were discovered in other parts of the country, and the great age of health resorts was ushered in, which lasted from about 1800 to about 1910. Smith's Health Resort was not unlike many of the other health spas in both the United States and Europe. Like these sister spas, Smith's Spa was situated so that it could serve as a haven for those who wanted to get away from the toils and cares of business and the demands of social obligations. Smith also made use of the salutary effects of fresh air, attractive scenery, and cheerful society. This was true of other resorts. Finally, like other resort directors, Smith provided treatments of his own in addition to the water. We'll come to that. Despite the similarities between Smith's spa and other spas throughout the United States and Western Europe, it was Smith's use of cedar water which set the neutral water health resort apart from any other in America, or for that matter, the world. Smith's record differed even from that in nearby Hamilton, just 12 miles from Egg Harbor. Hamilton's location would have made it feasible to have a cedar water resort in that city, but Hamilton was advertised as being an iron spring, which compared favorably with the famous waters of the Schwelbach resort in Prussia. Just how Smith came upon Egg Harbor and its cedar water is a subject shrouded in the ingenuity of Dr. Smith's promotional campaigns. Indeed, the man himself is a mystery. Like the biblical, I can't read this name, so I won't. He seems to have come out of nowhere. The fact that his heirs lived in Philadelphia suggests that he might originally have come from that city. Actually, I think he was born in Chicago, and he lived in East Brunswick before he came here. And before that, in Rahway. Several people who knew Dr. Smith think that he was of German background. His name appears only once, however, in the town council's minutes, as in the German version, which is Schmidt rather than Smith, of course. No mention is made of any formal medical training in the existing documents, and an inquiry into the State Board of Medical Examiners revealed no licenses granted to a Dr. Charles Smith in Egg Harbor or New Brunswick or anywhere else. In some of the newspaper articles that I may refer to later, he claimed that he had a degree from the University of Göttingen in Germany, and in another article he claimed he had a degree from the University of Jena in Germany. And I'll come back to more of that later, I hope. There are several accounts of how Smith discovered the therapeutic value of cedar water. According to one account, he was taking a walk near Egg Harbor's Union Creek, which is not where the current, where the health resort actually is. It's on Landing Creek, which is a neighboring creek to Union Creek. Suffering from various aches and pains, Smith accidentally fell into the water. Wading through the creek to the other side, he came out of the water a new man. All of his aches and pains were gone. As a doctor, he felt that the cure should be shared with mankind. Hence, he began his health resort. Another story found in the promotional booklet titled The Fountain of Youth, which is over there if you want to see it. It traces Dr. Smith's discovery back to November 17th, 1836. This is long before Egg Harbor City existed. According to this account, he was a member of a hunting party that had been hunting ducks in the islands of the Great Bay at the mouth of the Molucca River. Being adventurous, the party of 6 took an expedition inland. At about 3 o'clock in the afternoon of the second day, they came to a brook of fresh water. Tired and thirsty, the men drank the water and found it potable and refreshment. Dr. Smith enjoyed the water so much that he disrobed and took a bath. As they walked to Salem, it's about a 40-mile walk, they found that the water had provided them with extra energy and stamina. For many years thereafter, members of the party tried to find that brook, but to no avail. Finally, Smith saw in the plan of the newly laid out Egg Harbor City, which was being heavily publicized nationwide, that was the brook. And the booklet goes on to describe his wonderful discovery. And it's a long paragraph, so I'm gonna try to make this a little bit shorter by not reading it. Although the date of Smith's discovery of the cedar water is concealed by these conflicting reports, the date of Smith's appearance before the town council is well known, as is the date of the incorporation of the neutral water health resort. The date of Smith's birth is also obscured by Smith's promotions. Whether self-deluded or unscrupulous, Smith stated in a newspaper article that he was born in 1776, making him 130 years old at the time of his discovery of our health resort. The other consideration that I don't find in any of the literature that you should think to yourself is that if he became 40 years younger by bathing in that stream, did any of the hundreds or even thousands of people that he treated also become 125 or 130 years old? If he was really born in 1776, his death would have made him about 148 at the time of his death. I find that not credible. According to him, his longevity and vitality were due to mystic powers from the distillation of cedar water in the creek. End quote. This water was his liquid power for restoring youth to the aged and health to the invalid. He's got references for all of these statements. Self-delusion it might have been, for on October 6, 1913, Smith took over the Egg Harbor City's city park, which is right in the middle of the city, including the lake. For the next 50 years, Smith was to have full jurisdiction over the Egg Harbor City Lake until 1963, of course, which was long after his death. He died in 1923. Smith's plan was well received by the town council in 1900. Always looking to expand the town and its appeal to tourists and businessmen, they agreed to cooperate with him in his undertaking. On February 7th, 1900, the city agreed to clean the creek which Smith would use. The following autumn, they complied with his request to raise the height of London Avenue, where Smith's Sanitorium would be located, by 1 foot. In 1901, a lease was drafted by the town's property committee. But the honeymoon was apparently over, for Smith refused to agree upon a certain clause to be inserted in the lease that the whole matter was tabled. The city fathers continued to work with Smith, putting his alley in passable condition in 1902 and taking time to view the proposed site on several occasions. Sometime between Smith's coming to Egg Harbor and 1904, he put together a board of directors that would form the basis of his corporation. In 1904, the town clerk, writing in both English and German, as was the custom up until the First World War, recorded, quote, "In reference to the petition of several citizens to acquire the Sanitorium from London to Hamburg Avenues between Camp and Claudius Street, the public both included for a nominal sum. The committee has had a conference with the gentleman, and it recommends that as soon as they are organized and have paid off in capital $5,000, a capital of 5,000, I guess dollars, that the lots owned by the city can be transferred to them for a nominal sum under certain conditions. That's some kind of long quote. Dr. Smith's associates included several prominent citizens, men who had already made many contacts in the town, and it lists a whole long number of them. In 1905, Smith and these men, along with William Soikers, incorporated under the name of the Neutral Water Health Resort. Neutral water refers to the fact that the cedar water was neither alkaline nor acidic. I can't hardly believe that myself. Indeed, this was one of Smith's selling points. The local water is the most acidic that I've ever measured, and I used to teach a course in environmental chemistry methods. The lowest pH of a groundwater I've ever noted was about 3.2 in the middle of the Plains area. In March of 1905, a special council meeting for the purpose of selling a whole bunch of city blocks to Dr. Smith, who was given 1 year's time to pay off the sum, which was $270. The stream on Smith's property was altered to produce a serpentine, they call a double S curve. Once these canals were dug, they were lined with cedar, and concrete was poured along the curves to prevent erosion. Beach sand was brought in from nearby shore points to cover the bottom, and a sidewalk was put in connecting the canals to the sanatorium building itself. In addition to the sanatorium, which contained hotel rooms and a dining hall, Smith also had constructed a pump house, a windmill, various sheds, and a round sun house, which is the current Egg Harbor City Historical Society Museum. By 1908, the health resort was thriving, as this passage from a booklet reveals, quote, "Among the rare wonders of nature, one can, without doubt, also count nature's healing spring of Egg Harbor City. It was discovered in 1859 by Dr. Charles Smith. The water had the special quality that it did not contain minerals, and therefore has wonderful healing powers in that it extracts illness-causing materials from the body of the bather. Even in winter, when other water freezes in ice, it remains in a warm state. To let the sick benefit from the advantages of the water, Dr. Smith built a beautifully furnished sanitarium, and many people regained their health there, which they were not able to find anywhere else. The water has an indescribable effect, especially on rheumatic conditions. Thousands entered as weak cripples and left the institution strong, healthy persons. The institution is usually filled to capacity and will shortly receive an addition. It's a second building alongside of it, which existed until fairly recently as the children's prison for Atlantic County, the Harbor Fields. It's been moved elsewhere. Surrounded by a beautiful park and flower beds, it is a lovely spot of land. Whether or not we can trust these promotional pieces is not known, but all of the local citizens interviewed that remember the health resort recall it as being a popular spot. Dr. Smith's main treatment consisted of walking through cedar water in the canals against the current, which was reduced by a hand-operated pump, later electric, at one end and blocks at the other end. Each person had a set number of laps that he had to complete based on Dr. Smith's treatment for the patient. This procedure was followed twice daily. Before entering the waters, the patient would change into a long woolen suit in the bathhouse located under the front porch of the main building. The patient would then walk down and into the cedar water. The water was only waist deep in most areas of the canal, but in a few spots it was deeper. Ledges were provided for shorter people in some of the deeper areas. After the patients walked around the canal, they were required to walk around Dr. Smith's property to dry out. Dr. Smith put in a sidewalk around the property since it was part of his business, and cobblestones in the sidewalk indicate that the sidewalk dates back to the early 1900s. On these walks, Dr. Smith provided the patient with a banana and a dry roll as a snack. Every few steps, Dr. Smith's patients were to cross their arms and slap their hands on opposite shoulders. In the winter months, when it was too cold for most patients to walk around the property after bathing in the water, the patients were sent to a building with a windmill on top. In the center of this building was a column, and surrounding this column were small chambers, each one containing a radiator. Some chambers were larger for couples or friends who wanted to chat. After drying out thoroughly, the patient would wrap himself in a blanket and get back to the main building and change. In addition to this treatment, Dr. Smith also prescribed time in the sunroom and mud packs. In a circular building, variously referred to as the vapor baths or the carousel building or the Roundhouse, Smith's patients were treated to the warmth of the sun, which radiated through 23 windows. 30 feet in diameter, the 16-sided building, which still stands, has a window in each side except where there was a door. The second floor, one half the size of the first floor, has 8 sides with 8 large windows. Whether the building actually had steam or not is not known, but the many windows must have created somewhat of a greenhouse effect. Obviously, the warmth would be good for aching joints. If a patient had an ache in one specific part of his body, Dr. Smith would treat it with a mud pack made with cedar water. Heated mud was placed on specific areas. As the mud dried, the heat soothed the aching area as the body absorbed the supposed curative powers of the cedar water. I'll stop at this point and go through some of these slides and then come back and say a few more things, I think. This is a view in winter from a building, I don't know if you can all see, that is referred to as the windmill. It was never a bladed windmill, but you'll see other pictures of it later on. But it did have an observation deck that was 3 stories above the ground level and therefore could provide this picture. This is the current existing Roundhouse Museum, which was the very last to be built, only a year or 2 before he died. And this is shown in winter with the serpentine or the double S formation, the main residential building, and a changing room back there, and the still existing former Egg Harbor City water treatment plant back there. It's no longer in use, and it's been added to by a front section since this picture was taken in about 1924, which is when this building was built. By about the time he died. Let's see, I do this. This is another view of the whole complex taken from the 1924 aerial diagram that you must have an equivalent of in Hamilton, because they did it in just about every city in the country. But there's the existing Roundhouse Museum. There's the tower that I mentioned that is called a windmill by some people. And this, which is no longer there, was a glass-roofed drying out area that was warm even in winter because the sun would come right through the roof. And that you can see the foundations of, or the location of, if you know where to look, behind the existing building. And this is the second dormitory building that was built later from the first, and that was the children's detention home for Atlantic County. Okay. Couple of pictures of people in the water. And this shows the suit that people wore, which was made of wool. And we have one in our museum, the only one I think that survives that I know about. And this gives you some idea of how deep the water was, at least at one time. Of course, it's silted in since then and is nowhere near that deep now. Here's what the Union Creek looked like. It's called Union Creek. It's actually Landing Creek on the topographic maps. So I'm sure that's the correct statement. Here again is the tower, the so-called windmill that was never, so far as I know, a windmill. Here's the main residential building that is what you got on your invitation to this talk. Some other people in the water with their suits. The drying out building in the back with the glass roof. More people in the water. People being cured. More people being cured. They all had hats. I don't know, it's not mentioned in any of the literature that I've seen, anything to do with the hats.
Raining.
This is my attempt to show you what it looked like on the Sanborn map. I'm sure you know about, or some of you must know about Sanborn maps as being the gold standard for insurance companies in between 1880 and 1935, roughly, in this country. There were Sanborn maps for every large community in the country, showing the precise location of every building. And from the yellow color, you know that it was made of wood. And this, when I tried to put it onto this slide, is something you can move around, but I don't know how to do it here. This is the only picture I have taken inside the main building with all of the employees that worked at the health resort, and Dr. Smith himself in the back with his nurse, Miss Davidson. When I say his nurse, the nurse who worked for him that helped take care of all the patients. There he is, in two views, and I think that may be all I have on this. No, that's the children's prison later on, the second building. I will mention at the end, except I will mention it now, that Kurbads or cure sanatoriums are an idea that is still alive, and especially in Europe. And I had the opportunity, well, I lived for a year in Germany once, and my landladies loved nothing better than to take me with them to their local their local health spa, and to bathe in the very warm waters that were natural in that particular area of the southwestern part of Germany. But I had the pleasure about 10 years ago, I guess now, to spend a week in Budapest, city in Hungary. And the Szechenyi baths there are well known throughout the world. And I have a few photographs. I have the brochure here, it's in English, and you're welcome to look at that. But here, I think, are coming up a couple more of the way it looks today. And there's the Roundhouse Museum. This is the spot where the Roundhouse Museum is. It was before it was built. So it was taken in probably the teens, 19-teens. So there's the Szechenyi baths. That's how you spell Szechenyi. And it's a huge complex with at least 30 different temperatures and atmospheres and sprays and all that sort of thing. And you can spend a day there for a set price that includes lots of good food that is not meat, vegetables, fruit mostly, ice cream, and a massage comes with it for a half hour, and hundreds and thousands of people there every day of the year. Lovely, lovely area. Again, this is copies of the brochure, which is on the table over there. I think that's about it. Yeah. So let's see. How am I doing on time? Can I go for 2 more minutes? Okay.
Yep.
Finish up here.
We're talking about the ways in which Dr. Smith treated his patients aside from the water. Smith's treatments were not confined to the cedar water. In addition to medicine, which he sold for $1 a bottle, and only to those who brought their own bottles, Dr. Smith relied heavily on diet to treat his patients. Smith's patients would first drink a cup of special cocoa made from cocoa shells. Then food would be served 1 course at a time. The patient had to eat each food separately and totally before going to the next course. The food was plain and no gravies, sauces, or salt was used. Fruits and vegetables seemed to be more important than meat. According to a Mrs. Mickle, one of Smith's secretaries, Smith bought prunes by the crate. One citizen remembers that Dr. Smith taught that cheese opens and closes the stomach. Accordingly, when Louise Townsend Sculthorpe visited Dr. Smith, he was snacking on cheese. After dinner, the patients would play cards, a popular pastime among Germans in Egg Harbor, or rock in one of the many rockers on Smith's front porch. In addition to his various treatments, he also planted groves of pine trees, they're still there, both at the sanitarium and near the lake that he later leased from the city to intensify the antiseptic effects of pine. Did Dr. Smith's treatments work? Apparently, some thought so. Using a method of promotion typical of spa directors, Smith published a pamphlet sometime after 1901 in which testimonies of former patients were reprinted that testified to the effectiveness of his treatment. Whether or not these letters were the same genre as some of Smith's other stories is not known, but the addressees are complete enough so that someone living in Smith's day could have written to these patients to see if they really existed. Otto Bierhalle, writing from Jersey City on May 18, 1901, wrote, "Before I came down to Egg Harbor to take up your treatment, I was terribly affected with pain. I must say your treatment and bathing at your sanitarium in Egg Harbor, a natural cure, has saved me from a fatal ending." Another satisfied customer, a Mr. Goosewich from New York City, wrote on May 19th of 1901, "I hope you will live many more years and that other afflicted persons may have the benefit of your treatment." Finally, Carrie Rouse of Kingston, New York, reminded Smith, "If you remember, I took 2 months' treatment at Egg Harbor last year and have been entirely well ever since. Before coming to your water cure, I could not walk a quarter of a mile, while now I walk 3 miles before breakfast without fatigue." Local citizens also testified to Smith's effectiveness. Paul Krekel, a former star quarterback for the local high school football squad, recently said, quote, "I saw people go in there in wheelchairs and come out walking like normal," end quote. And when Louise Townsend Sculthorpe had a cold, Dr. Smith's medicine proved to be an effective cure. Some local people had such faith in Smith's cedar water that they continued to wade through the water even after the resort closed down. I've seen people in there even today, in the summertime especially, trying out the water. One Egg Harbor resident, Hugh Meineke, followed many of Smith's ideas for over 30 years after Smith's death, and we have Tom Meineke sitting right here to prove it. In order to attract patients from the more populous areas of North Jersey, Smith maintained an office either in Elizabeth or Jersey City. According to Paul Krekel, Smith commuted often from Egg Harbor to North Jersey, taking the train from Egg Harbor to Winslow Junction and then Winslow Junction to North Jersey. If a patient could not come to his health resort, he would ask for a urine sample, some even coming by mail. In some cases, Smith would mail his medicine to patients with whom he corresponded. Smith apparently had enough satisfied customers, for he soon began investing heavily in local real estate. Records in the county clerk's office in Mays Landing revealed that he accumulated more than 600 lots within Egg Harbor City in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. On October 6, 1913, he leased the city's park in the middle of Egg Harbor City, where the lakes are, for a period of 50 years. Either Smith really believed in his fountain of youth, or he was simply planning for the future of his corporation. After all, a corporation can outlive the man, even without the benefit of cedar water. On October 10th, 1918, Dr. Smith subleased the premises known as the Bungalow Hotel, that building's still there as well, next to the city lake, in the city park, to Charles Regensburg for 10 years and an annual lease of $216. Smith insisted in the contract that the hotel was to be used for the hotel business only, and there be no gaming or selling intoxicating liquors on Sunday. These stipulations reveal another side of Smith, especially in a time where blue laws were almost non-existent. Smith retained the right to oversee the dancing pavilion on the north shore of the lake and the privilege to use the same for picnics without charge. At these picnics, which Smith financed, horse-drawn buses took the townspeople over the 2-mile journey out to the lake. On the banks of the Cedar Water Lake, Smith treated his guests to baked goods from the town's bakeries, and games such as greased pole were played. Parties like this helped to establish good public relations between Smith and the townspeople. There were some in Egg Harbor who doubted Smith and his Cedar Water. The anonymous author of the pamphlet, The Fountain of Youth, which is over there, wrote, quote, "When the doctor brought a man here who was not able to walk and who looked like a corpse, the people said, 'That old doctor must be crazy to try to cure that man. He is almost dead now. It is an impossibility to cure him,' end quote." As to what the County Board of Health thought of Smith, it is not known. It may well be that Smith was so outside the pale of the medical profession that they were silent on his activities. But whatever the local doctors, and there were very few in this sparsely settled area, whatever they thought about Smith, certainly the national campaign against patent medicines, including bottled mineral water, must have been a thorn in Smith's side. The 1907 Pure Food and Drug Act, as Weiss points out, was a blow to the mineral water humbug. And in 1918, a pamphlet was published by the American Medical Association, which stated that mineral waters possess no mysterious or occult virtues in the treatment of disease. No mineral water will be accepted by the medical profession of alleged medicinal properties supported only by testimonials from bucolic statesmen and romantic old ladies. Even though Smith's spa did not technically use mineral water, his treatment would have fallen under the same condemnation. There were also those who refused to follow Smith's orders explicitly. Mrs. Mickle, his secretary, said of him, quote, "I don't know whether he was a real doctor. He called himself a doctor. He had some sort of medical education, no doubt. He was of German background, as I recall. When he got angry, he used to swear in German, and he was very short-tempered with his patients. If they didn't obey his directions, he'd say, 'Get out of my house,' and wouldn't have anything to do with them until he'd simmer down. He was a good man, but expected his orders to be followed," end quote. In general, Smith was a respected member of the community. Paul Kruppel said that some people thought his treatments were queer, but he was respected. I cannot recall a single instance where someone ridiculed him personally. The fact that Smith created jobs in Egg Harbor, brought in tourists, provided free picnics on the city lake, and gave out rock candy to children helped him become accepted in the community. Also, if he was of German background, as Mrs. Mickle indicates, this would have helped him too. Sometime during World War I, Smith's Sanitorium caught fire and burned to the ground. Smith rebuilt, but on September 1st of 1921, he sold all the real estate owned by him or by the Neutral Water Health Resort Company to Henry Wimberg, the local undertaker. In the deed, Smith retained the right to have a room for himself and for his nurse, and the privilege to eat in the dining room whenever he so desired. On October 1st, 1922, Smith released Wimberg from this arrangement for a sum of $1,500. Smith died soon afterward, for by 1926, we read that his heirs, Albert E. Smith and Emma A. Smith, sold 7 lots of Egg Harbor City to the Wimberg family. Having supposedly restored youth and vitality to many, Smith's Cedar Water failed its greatest advocate. Perhaps it was the sudden onslaught of old age that caused him to sell his fountain of youth. The Wimbergs renamed the health resort, calling it the Ramona Springs, but the institution apparently died with its founder, for by 1930 there was no mention of the sanatorium in the town Diamond Jubilee booklet. Years later, Smith Sanatorium was fenced in, and the building was used for the Atlantic County Detention Home. That should be just the second building. The first building was gone. Today, the only things that still exist are the canals and the Roundhouse, which is used for storage by the city of Egg Harbor. Remember, this is not current. A grove of pine trees remains also trees that were planted by Smith. There has been some talk of using the Roundhouse as a recreation center, but there was no strong movement at this time for such a project. This was 1984, I think. Smith is gone, and so are most of the last vestiges of his neutral water health resort. Yet the question remains, was Smith a quack, or did his treatment really work? With his long, flowing white beard hanging down to his waist, and his less than honest advertising claiming to be 130 years old, Smith certainly is a candidate for being included in a book on the great age of quackery. And his ideas that the poisons within the body would flow into the cedar water as pure water flowed into the patient's body has not been proven by modern medicine. Yet to call Smith a quack seems a bit too strong, for many of Smith's ideas have been accepted by present-day physicians. In his advocacy of no salt in the diet, and of not diluting digestive juices by drinking while eating, of eating lots of fruit, cheese, and vegetables, and skimping on meat, Smith presaged modern nutritionists. And even though Smith, as well as other hydropathic physicians, hydropathic, that's the word, did not fully understand why water had therapeutic value, water is still used today in the treatment of injuries and aches and pains by doctors and physical therapists alike. Finally, by getting his patients out of doors, breathing in the cool sea breezes blowing in from the ocean, and taking brisk walks around his property, Smith may have done more for his patients than many conventional doctors in his day. The scanty evidence that we have about Dr. Smith suggests that throughout his career, he walked on the border that separates quackery and modern medicine. As Arthur Koestler suggested years ago in his history of astronomy, called The Sleepwalkers, it is very often those scientists who go beyond the established conventions of the day and that make the greatest discoveries. Perhaps someday we will find that Dr. Smith was right after all. So much for Bob Peterson and for me. Thanks. I think to read that, because it really did say everything.
How much did he charge? How much did he charge these people to go to?
There's no record of that.
No
I
record.
don't know. Do you know, or does anybody?
heard, no.
Okay, we don't know.
But he made money. Obviously, he had to make money.
Remember, there were 20 hotels in Egg Harbor City.
Yeah.
And people could stay there as well, so it wasn't necessary that they actually lived there. But the only mention of money is that $1 was what he charged for a bottle. Yeah, yeah.
But you had to
And
bring
it
your
was
own
very
bottle.
much earlier time in history. when
BYOB.
postage
Yeah.
stamp was 2 cents, right? or whatever. I have to get close to you to hear.
Sir, is this the same area that's known as Peace Pilgrim Park? Is that the area that's
It's
named
now
after
called
her?
Peace Pilgrim Park.
Is that right?
It's also Egg Harbor City's dog park, unofficially.
Of course.
Unofficially.
We have that here too.
Yes. Was there another question? Yeah.
One thing that, if you ever go to the Egg Harbor Historical Science Museum, inside on the left maybe still, there's a book about this thick.
Yes, it's
Where-
this thick.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, it
Well,
was
of his
real thick.
cures, of his cures.
Yeah, and all of
He
his
had a
pa-
book that recorded every patient,
Every
the
patient
treatment
is
and the
logged.
result, and it's been behind glass ever since I've been there. And it's been declared too fragile to be opened. And as another appendix, we have, as one of our members, a guy named Roy Carl Weiler, descendant of the barber locally, who enjoys writing racy novels. And they're very racy, and we sell them. And one of them is titled The Secret of the Museum. One of them is titled The Secret of the Museum. And the secret of the museum is in those books. And in order to save somebody's life, it needed to get into those books, and he never quite achieves it. But it's part of the theme of the book, of the novel. Not real. Is there something else?
Very good.
Any other questions? Thank you so
Very
much. Dick, when is the museum open? What are the hours for the museum?
Wednesday, Saturday, 1 to 4.
Wednesday and Saturday, 1 to 4. Please visit if you haven't. It is just a
And if you
magnificent.
can't make those times, we will work something out. because I live only 4 blocks away.
Yeah, yeah. Very good. Thank you so
And
much.
it's a good, nice mile walk for me to go back and forth. Yeah.
I'd like to just kind of make my own editorial comment here for a second. Was Dr. Smith really a quack? Think about, as Dick mentioned, Europe and the spas that are in Europe. Think of the saunas that the Finnish and the Swedes use. These water or these resorts and water cure methods were very popular all through the Northeast in the late 1800s and 1900s here. The idea of using water to help you with your pain. How many women here have taken a hot bath with Epsom salts? That's a water cure method. How many men have taken a nice hot shower? It relaxes you, and perhaps some of the relaxation is part of the cure. You've heard about tuberculosis and the TB sanitariums. What did they use? Sunlight. It was just the sun and the value of the sun. So was he a quack? Well, he certainly maybe went a little too far. But as Dick said, and as the end of his discussion said, some of the methods were well ahead of the time, and doctors now are just beginning to really understand the value of what the earth provides. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Talked about